Their contract was clear until the billionaire kissed the girl and exposed the truth.
The desperate proposal. The breaking point. Victoria Stone sat in the dimmed office of Stone Legacy Hotels, watching the Manhattan skyline fade into evening darkness. The financial report spread across her mahogany desk told a story she refused to accept. 28 days remained before the bank would seize everything her family had built over 3 generations. Her phone buzzed with another message from the hospital where her mother was recovering from surgery. The medical bills alone could fund a small country. She pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. Harvard Business School had prepared her for many things, but not for watching her family empire crumble while her mother fought for her health. The numbers refused to change no matter how many times she recalculated them. $47 million in debt. No investors willing to risk their money on a sinking ship. No miracle waiting around the corner. An unexpected visitor. The knock on her door came at 7 in the evening when most of the staff had gone home. Her assistant poked her head in with an apologetic expression. "A gentleman insisted on seeing you. He said it concerns your hotels." Victoria smoothed her burgundy dress and straightened her shoulders. Even in crisis, appearance mattered. She had learned that lesson from her grandmother. The man who entered moved with the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. Julian Westbrook was taller than she expected, with dark brown hair and eyes that seemed to assess everything in seconds. His navy suit probably cost more than her monthly salary, and his presence filled the room with an energy that made her suddenly aware of how small her office had become. "Miss Stone." His voice carried authority without arrogance. "I believe we should talk about your situation." He settled into the chair across from her without waiting for an invitation. Victoria felt her spine stiffen at his presumption. "My situation is private, Mr. Westbrook. If you came here to make a lowball offer for my properties, you can save us both time." A slight smile crossed his face. "Actually, I came to offer you something far more interesting. A solution that benefits us both. The business arrangement." Julian leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "I need a wife. Not for romance or companionship, but for business purposes. My father controls the majority of our company shares, and he refuses to hand over full control until I settle down and prove stability. Meanwhile, you need significant capital to save your hotels and cover your family expenses." Victoria stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want to marry me because your father has trust issues. That seems extreme even for a billionaire." He pulled out a leather folder and slid it across her desk. "This is a preliminary outline of what I propose. A 2-year marriage contract. I pay off all your debts immediately, provide a monthly allowance of $50,000, and invest in renovating your hotel properties. In return, you play the role of my devoted wife at family gatherings and business events. After 2 years, we divorce quietly, and you keep everything." Victoria opened the folder with trembling fingers. The numbers swam before her eyes. He was offering her more than salvation. He was offering her a future. But the price was her freedom, her authenticity, and 2 years of living a lie. What about love? The question escaped before she could stop it. What if one of us meets someone real during these 2 years? Julian's expression remained neutral. "We remain discreet and professional. This is a business transaction, Miss Stone. Love has no place in business." She thought of her mother lying in that hospital bed, of the employees who would lose their jobs if the hotels closed, of the legacy that would die with her failure. Love seemed like a luxury she could not afford. Weighing the options. That night, Victoria sat in her small apartment surrounded by old photo albums. Pictures of her father cutting ribbons at hotel openings, her grandmother shaking hands with presidents and celebrities, her mother laughing at a charity gala before the illness took hold. 3 generations of dreams and hard work rested on her shoulders. Sophie arrived with Chinese takeout and wine, taking one look at Victoria's face before pouring generous glasses. "Talk to me. What happened?" Victoria explained everything while Sophie listened with growing amazement. When she finished, her best friend sat back and whistled low. "That is either the craziest thing I have ever heard or the most romantic setup for a real love story ever." "It is not romantic. It is a contract. A business deal." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "You are going to marry a gorgeous billionaire who just happens to need a wife at the exact moment you need a financial miracle. And you think there is no chance real feelings will develop? Life does not work like that, Victoria." "But what if it does not work?" Victoria whispered. "What if I give up 2 years of my life for nothing?" Sophie reached across and squeezed her hand. "What if you do nothing and lose everything anyway? At least this way you are fighting back." The decision. The next morning, Victoria requested a meeting with Julian at his office in One World Trade Center. The view from the 78th floor made her feel like she was standing on top of the world. Or about to fall off it. Julian stood by the windows, looking perfectly at ease with the height and power surrounding him. "I have conditions." Victoria handed him a typed list. He scanned it with interest. Separate bedrooms. No interference in hotel management decisions. Complete financial transparency. Weekly allowances deposited automatically. And a clause that lets me end the agreement early if you become controlling or abusive. These are reasonable. Julian nodded. "I expected nothing less from someone smart enough to run a hotel empire. Then I have one question before I sign." Victoria met his eyes directly. "Why me? You could have any woman in New York. Models, socialites, women who would actually want to marry you. Why choose someone you have to bribe?" For the first time, Julian's confident mask slipped slightly. "Because those women would fall in love with me or with my money, and that creates complications. You are different. You have your own legacy to protect, your own dreams to chase. You will not expect something I cannot give." She understood then. He was just as trapped as she was, bound by family expectations and business pressures. Maybe they were not so different after all. 3 days later, Victoria stood in a small courthouse with Sophie as her witness. Julian arrived with his lawyer, both men in impeccable suits. The ceremony took 11 minutes. The judge pronounced them husband and wife without emotion, as if he married strangers for business purposes every day. When Julian kissed her cheek for appearance's sake, Victoria felt a strange flutter in her stomach that she firmly ignored. As they signed the marriage certificate, Victoria caught Julian watching her with an expression she could not read. Something flickered in his eyes that looked almost like regret or perhaps hope. Then it vanished, replaced by his usual cool professionalism. "Welcome to the arrangement, Mrs. Westbrook." He handed her a bank card. "Your new life starts now." Victoria slipped the card into her purse, feeling the weight of her decision settle over her shoulders. She had just married a stranger to save her family. Nothing about this could possibly go wrong. Could it? Playing house, Victoria moved into the guest wing of Julian's penthouse the following week. The space was larger than her entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park and furniture that belonged in a museum. Everything was pristine, cold, and utterly impersonal. Much like the marriage itself, Julian had left a handwritten note on the marble kitchen counter. "Make yourself comfortable. My housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, comes Mondays and Thursdays. I travel frequently for business. We have dinner with my father this Saturday at 7. Dress formally." The note was signed simply with his initials, as if he were her boss rather than her husband. She unpacked her belongings slowly, hanging her modest wardrobe in a closet designed for 10 times as many clothes. Her favorite coffee mug looked out of place among the expensive china. Her worn paperbacks seemed shabby next to the leather-bound first editions lining the shelves. This was not a home. It was a museum where she happened to sleep. The first test Saturday arrived too quickly. Victoria spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing an emerald green dress that her mother had worn to a gala years ago. The fabric hugged her curves elegantly, and she paired it with simple pearl earrings. When she emerged from her room, Julian was waiting in the foyer, adjusting his cufflink stud. He looked up and froze. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, his usual composure slipping. "You look beautiful." The words came out softer than she expected, almost genuine. "Thank you." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You clean up nicely yourself." The drive to his father's estate in Connecticut passed in uncomfortable silence. Julian seemed tense, his jaw tight as he gripped the steering wheel. Finally, Victoria could not stand it anymore. "Tell me about your father." "What should I expect?" James Westbrook is a traditional man who believes marriage equals maturity. Julian's voice carried an edge of bitterness. "He built his empire from nothing and thinks everyone should do the same. He has been waiting for me to settle down since I turned 30. Now he gets his wish, even if it is not exactly what he imagined." Meeting the family. The Westbrook estate sprawled across 20 acres of manicured lawns and gardens. The main house was a colonial mansion that screamed old money and older expectations. Julian's hand found the small of Victoria's back as they walked to the door, and she felt electricity shoot through her at the touch. "Remember, we are happily married. My father is sharp. Do not give him any reason to doubt us." James Westbrook was a silver-haired man with Julian's intense eyes and a handshake that could crush bones. "So you are the woman who finally caught my son." He studied Victoria like she was a business acquisition. "Tell me, how did you two meet?" Victoria had rehearsed this story a dozen times. "At a charity auction for children's hospitals. Julian outbid me on a vintage wine collection, and I told him he had terrible taste. He was intrigued enough to ask me to dinner to defend his choices." James laughed, a sound like rolling thunder. "Sounds like Julian. Always competitive. And your family, Miss Stone? What do they think of this sudden marriage?" "My mother approves completely." Victoria kept her voice steady despite the lie. "She believes Julian and I complement each other well. My father passed away 3 years ago, but I think he would have appreciated Julian's business acumen." The words tasted bitter. Her father would have hated this arrangement, would have told her to find another way. Cracks in the foundation. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as a meal. James asked pointed questions about their relationship, their future plans, their thoughts on children. Julian fielded most of them with practiced ease, but Victoria noticed how his hand clenched around his wine glass whenever his father pushed too hard. "When do you plan to give me grandchildren?" James asked over dessert. "You are not getting any younger, Julian. Both of you should start thinking about the next generation. We are taking things one step at a time." Julian's voice was tight. "We have only been married a week, Father," James waved dismissively. "Your mother and I were expecting you within 3 months of our wedding. Marriage is about building a legacy, not playing house." Victoria felt Julian's anger radiating across the table and impulsively reached over to take his hand. "We will know when the time is right." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Right now, we are focused on merging our lives and supporting each other's careers." The touch of her hand seemed to calm Julian immediately. He looked at her with surprise, then gratitude, his fingers intertwining with hers. "My wife is right. We have time." James studied their joined hands with satisfaction. "Good. At least you know how to support each other. That is more than many couples have. An unexpected connection. The drive home was quieter but less tense. Julian's shoulders had relaxed, and he kept glancing at Victoria as if seeing her differently. "Thank you for that. Back there with my father. You did not have to defend me. We are supposed to be a team." Victoria looked out at the passing lights. "Even if it is just for show, we should act like we actually care about each other. What if it is not just for show?" The question hung in the air between them. Julian pulled into the parking garage of their building but did not get out immediately. What if we became friends during this arrangement? Would that complicate things? Victoria turned to face him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. I think it would make things easier. 2 years is a long time to live with someone you actively dislike. Friends sounds good. She extended her hand formally, and he laughed, actually laughed, before shaking it. Friends it is, Mrs. Westbrook. The shift over the next few weeks, something changed between them. Julian started leaving coffee for Victoria in the morning, remembering that she took it with 2 sugars and cream. She began cooking dinner on the nights he was home, discovering he had a weakness for homemade pasta and good conversation. They fell into an easy rhythm of shared breakfasts and late-night talks on the terrace. Victoria threw herself into renovating the stone legacy hotels with the capital Julian had provided. She hired back laid-off staff, updated rooms, and implemented new marketing strategies. The flagship Manhattan location began showing positive reviews within a month. Each success felt sweeter because Julian celebrated with her, asking detailed questions about her plans and offering insights from his own business experience. One evening, Victoria returned home exhausted after a 14-hour day solving a crisis at the Boston property. She found Julian in the kitchen, attempting to cook. The scene was chaotic with pots boiling over and smoke coming from the oven. I thought I would surprise you with dinner. He looked sheepish amidst the disaster. Clearly, I overestimated my abilities. Victoria laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter. What were you trying to make? Chicken parmesan. Julian opened the oven to reveal something charred beyond recognition. I followed the recipe exactly. She moved beside him, turning off burners and salvaging what she could. The recipe probably did not account for a billionaire who has never cooked before. Come on, we will order pizza and you can help me make a salad. That seems more your speed. They ate sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the wreckage of Julian's cooking attempt. He told her about a difficult negotiation with Japanese investors, and she shared stories about dealing with demanding hotel guests. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and comfortable silences. At some point, Victoria realized she was having more fun than she had experienced in years. Dangerous territory. The charity gala arrived on a crisp October evening. Victoria wore a midnight blue gown that made her feel like royalty, and Julian looked devastating in his tuxedo. As they entered the ballroom, his hands settled possessively on her waist, and she felt her heart skip. They had been practicing this public affection for weeks, but tonight it felt different. Real. They danced to a slow jazz number, and Julian pulled her closer than necessary. You are a good dancer. His breath was warm against her ear. My mother insisted on lessons. Victoria smiled, allowing herself to relax into his embrace. Apparently, proper young ladies need to know how to waltz. Thank goodness, or I would be stepping all over your expensive shoes. His laugh rumbled through his chest. I would not mind. She looked up and found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The music faded away. The crowded ballroom disappeared. For one suspended moment, it was just the two of them, and Victoria felt the earth shift beneath her feet. Julian. Her voice came out as a whisper. Yes? His hand moved from her waist to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. We should not. But even as she said it, she leaned into his touch. This was not part of the contract. I know. His eyes dropped to her lips. We definitely should not. The kiss happened in slow motion. His lips met hers softly at first, testing, questioning. Then she responded, and the kiss deepened into something that burned away every rational thought. Her hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer. His fingers tangled in her hair, careful not to destroy the elegant updo but desperate to touch her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. The ballroom had noticed. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Julian Westbrook kissing his wife like a man in love. What a scandal. What a perfect performance. Except Victoria knew the truth. That kiss had been anything but performance. It had been real, terrifyingly real, and it changed everything. That we should go. Julian's voice was rough. Victoria nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They made their excuses and left early, the drive home charged with unspoken tension. In the elevator to the penthouse, they stood on opposite sides, carefully not touching. Both knew that one more touch would ignite something neither was ready to face. Julian stopped at Victoria's bedroom door. "About what happened tonight. I think we need to talk about the boundaries of this arrangement." Before he could finish, she placed a finger on his lips. "Not tonight. Please. I cannot think clearly right now." He nodded slowly, his eyes dark with emotions she was afraid to name. "Good night, Victoria." "Good night, Julian." She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. This was supposed to be simple. A business transaction with clear rules and a definite ending. But that kiss had shattered every carefully constructed wall between them. She touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his mouth on hers. In the hallway, Julian stood with his hand pressed against her door, fighting the urge to knock and finish what they had started. He had broken his own rule. Never mix business with emotion. Never let anyone close enough to hurt him. But Victoria had slipped past his defenses with her strength, her laughter, and her unexpected kindness. Now he was in dangerous territory with no map and no idea how to find his way back to safety. The morning after, Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and the memory of Julian's kiss burning through her mind. She had barely slept, replaying every moment of the gala, every touch, every look that had passed between them. The contract sat in her desk drawer, a reminder that this was supposed to be temporary, emotionless, and safe. Nothing about last night had been safe. She found Julian in the kitchen, already dressed in running clothes and staring at his coffee like it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. They looked at each other for a long moment before both started speaking at once. "About last night. We need to discuss." They stopped, and despite the tension, Victoria felt a smile tug at her lips. "You first." Julian set down his mug with careful precision. "I crossed a line last night. That kiss was not part of our agreement, and I apologize if I made you uncomfortable. We should probably establish clearer boundaries going forward to prevent any confusion about the nature of our arrangement." The formal word stung more than Victoria expected. "Right. Of course. Just a moment of playing our roles too convincingly." She poured herself coffee with shaking hands. "No harm done. We can forget it happened." But even as she said it, she knew forgetting was impossible. That kiss had awakened something in her that refused to go back to sleep. The business trip 2 days later, Julian announced he was leaving for Tokyo for 10 days to finalize the deal with his Japanese investors. The same deal that had prompted this entire arrangement. Victoria felt relief mixed with disappointment as she helped him pack. Space would be good for them. Time to remember why they had done this in the first place. The penthouse felt enormous and empty without him. Victoria threw herself into work, spending 18-hour days at the hotels. The flagship property was thriving, but the Boston and Miami location still needed attention. She buried herself in spreadsheets and renovation plans, anything to avoid thinking about how much she missed Julian's presence. Sophie visited on the 5th night, taking one look at Victoria's exhausted face before ordering takeout and opening wine. "You look terrible. When did you last sleep?" Victoria shrugged. "Sleep is overrated. I have 3 hotels to save and a fake marriage to maintain. Speaking of which, how is your billionaire husband?" The question made Victoria's chest tighten. "He is in Tokyo. We barely talk except for occasional text updates about his meetings. Which is fine. This is a business arrangement, remember? We are not supposed to miss each other." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "But you do miss him." Victoria opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. The truth was undeniable, the confession. Julian called at midnight Tokyo time, 3 in the afternoon New York time. Victoria was reviewing contractor bids when his face appeared on her screen. He looked tired, his hair slightly disheveled, his tie loosened. "I know I said I would just text, but I needed to hear your voice. How are the hotels?" They talked for an hour about business, carefully avoiding anything personal. But as the conversation wound down, Julian's expression grew serious. "Victoria, I need to tell you something. The deal here is almost finalized. My father will transfer full control of the company to me next month. Which means our arrangement has served its purpose ahead of schedule." Her heart dropped into her stomach. "So we can end the contract early. Get divorced and go back to our separate lives. Is not that what you want?" Julian's jaw tightened. "What I want and what makes sense are two different things. This was supposed to be simple. A transaction. But somewhere between playing house and actual conversations, things got complicated." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "Complicated how? Say it, Julian. Tell me what you are really thinking." "I am thinking that I made a mistake." His voice was raw with emotion. "I am thinking that I hired someone to pretend to be my wife, and somehow she became the most important person in my life. I am thinking that kiss at the gala was not an act, and pretending it was is killing me." The confession hung between them across thousands of miles. Victoria's hands trembled as she gripped her phone. "I think about that kiss every single day. I think about you every single day. This was supposed to be fake, but nothing about how I feel is fake anymore. Julian." His name came out as a whisper. "What are we doing?" The secret revealed before Julian could answer, a commotion erupted behind him on the video call. Voices shouted in Japanese, and someone knocked urgently on his hotel room door. He stood abruptly, and Victoria caught a glimpse of panic on his face. "I have to go. There is an emergency with the deal. I will call you back." The screen went dark. Victoria sat staring at her phone, her heart racing with unfinished confessions and new fears. Hours passed with no word from Julian. She tried calling, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. At 2 in the morning, her phone finally rang. But it was not Julian. It was his assistant, Richard, and his voice was strained. "Mrs. Westbrook, there has been a situation. Julian asked me to call you. The Japanese investors discovered something about your marriage. They hired a private investigator." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "What did they find?" "Everything. The contract, the financial arrangement, the fact that you were strangers before the wedding. They are threatening to pull out of the deal entirely. They feel deceived and insulted. Julian is trying to salvage the situation, but it looks bad. Very bad." She was on a plane to Tokyo 6 hours later, having called in every favor she had to get a last-minute flight. If their secret was exposed, she would face it with Julian, not hide in New York while he dealt with the consequences alone. The 14-hour flight gave her too much time to think, to replay every moment of their arrangement, to realize how spectacularly they had failed at keeping things purely business. The confrontation. Victoria arrived at the hotel where Julian was meeting with the investors. She was rumpled from travel, still wearing jeans and a sweater, completely unprepared for a business meeting. But she walked into that conference room with her head high, driven by something stronger than fear. Love. The realization hit her like a freight train. She loved Julian Westbrook, and she was done pretending otherwise. The room fell silent as she entered. Julian stood at the head of a long table, surrounded by stern-faced businessmen. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "Telling the truth." She moved to stand beside him, facing the investors with steady courage. "You hired investigators to look into our marriage. You found our contract. You know this started as a business arrangement. All of that is true. One of the older investors, Mr. Tanaka, spoke in perfect English. Then you admit you deceived us. You presented a false marriage to gain our trust and secure this partnership. That is unacceptable in our culture. We value authenticity and honor above all else. Victoria felt Julian tense beside her, but she pressed on, "You are right that our marriage started as a contract." Victoria's voice was clear and unwavering. "But you are wrong if you think what we have now is false. Yes, we married for business reasons. Julian needed to prove stability to his father, and I needed capital to save my family's legacy. We made a practical decision that benefited us both. But something unexpected happened. We fell in love." Julian turned to stare at her, his expression a mixture of shock and hope. Victoria kept her eyes on the investors. "I did not plan to fall in love with my husband. It was not in the contract. It was not part of the deal. But love does not follow contracts or timelines. It happens when two people spend time together, when they support each other through difficulties, when they discover that the person standing beside them makes life better just by being there." The declaration. She finally turned to face Julian, her heart in her throat. "I know we said this was temporary. I know we promised to keep things professional. But I cannot do this anymore. I cannot pretend that kiss meant nothing. I cannot pretend I do not count the hours until you come home. I cannot pretend I do not love you, even though loving you was never part of the plan." The conference room had gone completely silent. Julian reached for her hand, his fingers trembling as they intertwined with hers. "You love me." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "I love you. Completely, terrifyingly, inconveniently. And if that ruins your business deal, I am sorry. But you deserve to hear the truth." Julian pulled her close, his other hand cupping her face with infinite tenderness. "The truth is that I have been in love with you since you stood up to my father at dinner. Maybe even before that. The truth is that I have been lying to myself for weeks, pretending I was following a contract when really I was falling for my own wife. The truth is that you are the best thing that ever happened to me, business arrangement or not." He kissed her then, in front of the investors and assistants and lawyers. Kissed her like a man who had finally stopped running from his feelings. Victoria melted into him. Her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a moment, the whole world consisted of just the two of them. When they finally broke apart, Mr. Tanaka was smiling. "That." He gestured between them. "That is what we needed to see. Not a perfect marriage or a flawless arrangement, but two people willing to fight for each other. Honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, is more valuable than any performance." Julian blinked in surprise. "You are not pulling out of the deal?" "On the contrary." Mr. Tanaka stood and bowed respectfully. "We are more confident than ever. You both showed courage by admitting your unconventional beginning. More importantly, you showed genuine partnership and love. That is the kind of integrity we want in our business associates. The deal is approved." The new beginning. Back in their hotel room, Victoria and Julian stood on the balcony overlooking Tokyo's glittering skyline. She leaned against his chest, his arms wrapped securely around her waist. "So what happens now? Our contract technically has 22 months remaining. Do we still pretend this is temporary?" Julian turned her to face him, his eyes soft with emotion. "I propose we tear up the contract and start over. No business arrangements, no end dates, no pretending. Just a real marriage between two people who love each other. What do you say, Victoria Stone Westbrook? Will you marry me again, for real this time?" She smiled through happy tears. "I thought you would never ask." They kissed as the sun rose over Tokyo, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The contract that had brought them together was meaningless now. What mattered was the love they had found in the spaces between obligation and performance, in the quiet moments of shared coffee and late-night conversations, in the courage to admit that sometimes the best things in life are completely unplanned. 3 months later, they stood before their families and friends in a small ceremony in Central Park. This time, the vows were real. The promises were genuine. And when Julian kissed his bride, there was no audience to perform for, no investors to impress. Just two people who had found love in the most unexpected place, in a contract that was supposed to keep them apart but instead brought them together forever. Victoria's mother cried happy tears from her wheelchair, healthy enough now to attend her daughter's real wedding. James Westbrook clapped his son on the back, admitting he had known something was different about this marriage from the start. Sophie caught the bouquet and whispered to Victoria that she had called it from the beginning. As Victoria and Julian drove away from the reception, hands clasped tightly together, she thought about how far they had come. From strangers signing a contract to partners building a life together. The Stone Legacy hotels were thriving under their combined management. Julian's company had expanded internationally with the Japanese partnership. But more importantly, they had built something money could never buy. A real love story that started with a lie but ended with the truest thing either of them had ever known. Their contract was clear, but their hearts had written a better story. One filled with unexpected love, honest confessions, and the courage to choose each other every single day. And that was worth more than any business deal could ever be. The end.